Every day I search in spite of me. Every day I search for what I cannot see. Every day I search for you. Every day I search for the truth. Just can't help falling in love with you. More with everything you do. Speak and the mountains tremble with fear. And at the sound of your voice, I know you are near, be near to me. Every day I long deep inside of me. Every day I long for what's plain to see. Every day I long to be with you. Every day I long for the truth. Just can't help falling in love with you. More with everything.
are live.
Hello and welcome to Church Online with the Ecclesian House. I'm Pastor Bill, and joining me is the ever poignant and rocking his new web camera, Pastor Nooms.
Hello, hello.
How you doing, man?
I'm good. New camera, new pimple, and if anyone's wondering why my nose is red, there it is. I'm putting it out there. The camera is not causing that.
Tell?
Oh, they can so tell. Oh, it's so bad. Billiam goes, so the camera's making your nose look really red. I went, no, that's exactly the right color. So, it's a cheap camera, but it still leaps and bounds above the other one. I could technically stream in the dark, and it can still actually see me at least a little bit, as opposed from before. Yeah. Which I'll probably do some dark streaming when I do some of the scarier stuff, like Doom Eternal and some of the hardcore streams that might
or make everything look red.
I could at any moment. I can press that button, and you would know, sadly, or I would do it just randomly, red, and then come back. But it sadly would the program I use to make my webcam go to 2 inputs is what does that. So you would know, and you would go. And how was your week?
Busy. The world of rideshare for North Central Texas has been busy.
Really?
When I go out to drive, it's basically nonstop. I rarely have time to go to the car wash to get my car washed now and to vacuum. When I have to use the restroom or stop to eat, I have to tell it well in advance before I drop someone off not to give me any more rides.
Wow.
Or it'll just automatically give me another ride when I drop off the other person, and it's just back to back. So
That's good though.
That's good to some degree. I wonder why rideshare's blowing up so much here, though. I mean, it's not like everyone's returning back to normal or anything like we shouldn't be doing. Ooh, that's sweet tea.
We don't have unsweet.
I wasn't expecting it, though. My sugar intake is much lower than it used to be, and
yeah, you stopped taking in sugar a while back, didn't you?
yeah. I guess we ran out of unsweet tea, and I guess I was told and I forgot. Which happens.
That's funny.
Well, that's good, though, that it's been so busy.
Do you want to finish this?
Yeah, I think there's less drivers than there was before. You know, people getting on unemployment from rideshare, because that was one of the things that changed for Texas. Was they made it to where rideshare drivers could qualify for unemployment related to coronavirus.
Really?
And then they did that thing where you get $600 extra a week on top of your unemployment in the state of Texas for a certain amount of weeks. And so you literally, if you're okay with cheating the system, you can literally make more money sitting at home on unemployment in Texas right now than you can going out and driving every day.
So those of you that are still driving, it's money.
We're making money, yeah. Not as much as the people on unemployment, but we're making
right,
money.
Of course.
Yeah.
It's not messed up, I promise.
Okay.
I promise.
One of my favorite desk toys are these little balls.
But I know how to do it now.
These little magnetic balls, right? I love these little things. And the first time my wife picked them up when they came home from the office, she goes, "Ooh, how do these work?" Crunch, and how, and then like I'm like, okay, fix it,
Be nice.
make it the cube, and she goes, "Oh yeah, no problem." To which, if you don't know how to do it with the magnetic balls, it's not. Once you know how, it's a snap. You do it in 10 minutes. But it was really funny because she's like, You can see her over there, like, pushing it, trying to see if she can get it flat. You're like, that's not going to work. That's not going to work either. So she just picked it up and looked down at it like something was wrong. And I was like, what did you do? But
that's funny.
She didn't do anything. All my office stuff that came to my house that never was in the house before because of all of this. And hasn't left because I haven't left in 2 weeks before, 3 weeks before COVID actually started. I was working from home, and then, I'm still here.
The last time I, quote unquote, worked in an office, my wife bought me this, right?
Yep.
This little TARDIS to go on my desk, and then I stopped working there. And so this has just kind of been sitting around the house for several years, waiting for me to have an actual office to put it in. So now it just kind of sits here in my home office, back here on this paperweight behind Pastor Nooms, where you can't see it on Sunday nights.
I can move myself for a minute. Ready?
No, that's okay.
Here it is.
If people want to see it, they can watch the live podcast videos that come out on Sunday nights, where you can see it in the background of the podcast video. But
do we have a guitar back there? Why do we have a guitar today back there that I can see in the corner?
There's no. Oh, that's my trombone case.
Oh, why do you have a trombone?
Because I played trombone in middle school and high school. I started playing trombone in 5th grade.
Still has it.
How did I forget that? Or did I know that?
It probably never came up.
No, I want you to play us something on the trombone.
Yeah, good luck with that. I pulled it out yesterday and was trying to play something, and I was like, first off, I don't remember notes, and second off, my lips don't remember how to make these notes. So. Anyway.
Afterwards, can you show me?
Show you how awful it is?
Yes.
All right. So last week's discussion, we talked about Sabbath Part 1, where we talked about the letter of the law of the Sabbath.
Yes.
And, kind of drove ourselves nuts trying to stick with just talking about the letter of the law and not going on to the spirit of the law, where the lion's share of what we really should be talking about exists.
Yes.
You know? And so this week, we get to talk about the spirit of the law.
Yes.
Yes.
The good part. Well, I mean, the Gracie part.
I'd call the spirit of the law the good part of the law. That's the good part.
Well, it's kind of like the comment we made last week of when people say things like, "Oh, I wish I lived a couple thousand years ago," and I'm like, no. I enjoy grace way too much to have lived pre-grace. Let's sacrifice goats.
Right.
Not down for it. Sorry. Nah. I put gardening gloves to clean up a broken trash bag earlier. Like, I can't see myself, sacrificing things. It's not gonna happen. Like, which, by the way, my Walmart gloves that I bought was 2 rights.
Was what?
2 rights.
Two rights?
2 rights. So I put this one on. It was like, oh, okay, cool. I put this one on, and I'm like, that feels wrong. What's... That's a thumb, and that's a... I got 2 rights.
2
Which is
rights
okay,
in my pack.
because I can just put, one on and do stuff, but, yeah, that's what I get for buying
Chinese-made products. Oh, did I say that?
No.
I didn't say that. You said that. Right. So last week we Matthew, Mark, Luke, John.
If that's how they go.
Right. We read from John 5, and we went from verses 1 all the way through verses 15, I think. 16. So we're going to do that again, except this time we're going to go all the way through verse 18.
Remind me which chapter, because I just forgot what you said.
John chapter 5.
5, yes.
Yep. Verses 1 through 18.
Yes.
After this, a Jewish festival took place, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. By the sheep gate in Jerusalem, there is a pool called Bethesda in Aramaic, which has 5 colonnades. Within these lay a large number of the disabled, blind, lame, and paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water, because an angel would go down into the pool from time to time and stir up the water. Then the first one who got in after the water was stirred up recovered from whatever ailment he had. One man was there who had been disabled for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and realized he had already been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the disabled man answered, "I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, but while I'm coming, someone goes down ahead of me." "Get up," Jesus told him. "Pick up your mat and walk." Instantly, the man got well, picked up his mat, and started to walk. Can we pause for a second? Because it always bugged me when you're watching videos of like they recreate Jesus, you know, and he'll say things like, "Get up, pick up thou mat and walk," and I'm like, Jesus is a monotone. That really bugs me. Jesus was a person. He talked like a person. Do you talk like a person? That's how Jesus talked. Okay. Now that day was a Sabbath, and so the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "This is the Sabbath. The law prohibits you from picking up your mat." Why is it that every time I hear the Jews giving Jesus a hard time, I hear it in Valley Girl?
Really? I hear it in Old Dude.
And so the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "This is the Sabbath. The law prohibits you from picking up your mat."
I hear it in Old Dude.
You hear it in Old Dude?
Like real Old Dude. Like
what does that mean?
Like the real stuffy old dude?
This is the Sabbath.
Yeah. Like the old
the
dude
law
who's...
prohibits you from picking up your mat.
That's how I hear it. Like with the finger and everything. Yeah. Like the Scrooge. I see
even better.
I hear all...
This is the Sabbath. Yeah. The law prohibits you from picking up your mat.
I hear all, not Sadducees, Pharisees. All Pharisees are Scrooge. And not the cool McDuck. We're talking like...
Not Scrooge McDuck.
Old school, like... Yeah, not cool Scrooge. Like bad Scrooge
Ebenezer.
Ebenezer.
Ebenezer Scrooge.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was going to say, the 3 ghosts. That guy. Continue.
Yeah. This is the Sabbath. The law prohibits you from picking up your mat. He replied, "The man who made me well told me, pick up your mat and walk." "Who is this man who told you, pick up your mat and walk?" they asked. But the man who was healed did not know who it was, because Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. After this, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you are well. Do not sin anymore, so that something worse doesn't happen to you." The man went and reported to the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. Therefore, the Jews began persecuting Jesus because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. Well, that's where we ended reading last week.
Yep.
So let's...
And can I say 2 things real quick about just overall? And this ties into the before. So, like, one thing when I was listening to it again today, after I read it when you send it to me, and then listen to it when I right before to refresh. When I was listening to it, I'm sitting there and I'm like,
let's just be clear.
What?
Let's just be clear. When I send it to you, all it is a title and an opening paragraph.
Depends.
And then I work on it throughout the week, and then when you get around to opening it is after I finish writing it.
It's before it's out though. Normally.
It's before it's yeah.
Normally. Sometimes it's not, but that's okay. But one of the things I find hilarious is like 2 things. One, people always like the grandiose, like you were mentioning before, the monotone Jesus of do this and then no and no. No, man. He rolled up and was like, "Get up," and then fell into the crowd. Like, wait, what? No credit, no, I'm Jesus. It just into the crowd. It's like, all right, who healed you? Oh, some
I don't
guy.
know. Some just came up and said, "Pick up your mat and walk," and I was like, "Okay."
And then Jesus later comes in and goes, "Good job picking that up." And then just like, you keep doing that part. Don't do the other stuff. Cool. Okay. Cool. And then just walks away again. And he's like, "Oh, I knew who it was now." I was not too busy picking up my mattress that I laid on. I now, and so it's just, I find that to be funny. And then the thing that happens so often in the New Testament, it was like, okay, thank you. You're healed. Don't tell people. And then some people are like, why would he say don't tell people? It's because of guys like this. Because this guy, the first thing he did was like, oh yeah, that guy. And then immediately it's like they started plotting. It's like,
Right.
so I just wanted to throw that out there because it was just kind of like, when I heard it again today, I was like, yeah, it's always that guy. It's that guy that always gets everyone else in trouble. Like, he ran to the legalistic people and were like, by the way, it was him.
Yeah.
But on the same token, he might not have had that motivation. That's me putting motivation on him that maybe is inaccurate. But I'm just saying.
Well, it's you reading the scripture through your own lens. You're
just because I'm a
applying
jerk
your own lens to the characters in the story.
But I can't imply that they're all jerks. Like, it doesn't.
Not in a what's the word I'm thinking of? Like when you're teaching someone, no. When you're just personalizing the story to learn for yourself.
Sometimes.
Yeah. All right. So verses 17 and 18, Jesus responded to them, "My Father is still working, and I am working also." This is why the Jews began trying all the more to kill him. Not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal to God. It's so interesting that Jesus breaks the letter of the law of the Sabbath, but sins not. Can we chew on that for a second? He broke the letter of the law and yet remained sinless.
Well, as we've talked about, we don't know what day was his actual Sabbath. He might have classified himself as a pastor, and so days when they weren't working, he was like, I got this. You can look at it from that standpoint, or you can look at it from the standpoint of he was following the will of God, and God said, you work when I tell you to, and he did it. I mean, there's a lot of area you can look at that. But yeah. What's important there is to know it's not a letter of the law thing, because there's plenty of letter of the law that people, New Testament Christians did not follow.
Right.
And that's a good example of it, because it's the spirit of the law that was important at that point after baptism.
What?
Meaning his, not ours.
His baptism.
Mm-hmm.
I got you.
Sorry.
It's like,
I took a drink
what
and then
what
raised
kind
my
of words did you
eyebrows
say?
like, is he going to say something about that? Because I just realized what I said could be open for interpretation. Let me see if he does.
that was pretty open there.
That's what happens when I try to get a drink in the middle of a sentence. My allergies kicking my butt. I'm thirsty as all get out. I cannot quench my thirst for some reason.
Right. So compassion and mercy, which is what we see here.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus is expressing compassion and mercy. We also see this where he heals the man with the shriveled hand on the Sabbath. We see Jesus move in mercy and compassion. Mercy and compassion are always more important than the letter of the law. We talk about there's faith, hope, and love is the greatest of all of those.
Mm-hmm.
And so love trumps hope and faith. If you're, making poker terms, or I don't want that to be misconstrued as I'm talking about the president and blah, blah, blah.
Wait.
Because his name is Trump.
Wait. Trump is not a poker term. It's a
poker term.
It's a bridge term. You don't trump things in poker.
Yeah, you do. You say a full house trumps a da-da-da trumps a da-da-da trumps a. It's a poker term. A trump is a hand in bridge, but it is a poker term.
Okay.
Go ahead. Clickety-clackety on your loud keyboard.
Right. You're all trying to go quiet.
And look up the usage of the word trump. I'll wait.
All I get is references of
the president
playing poker. Let's go to the Wikipedia for poker and search for the word Trump.
That's probably not a good idea.
Zero
references to the word Trump on the Pokerpedia.
So poker rules. Let's go for the basics of poker from bicycle. Okay. Control F. Trump. Nope. Nowhere in it. I gotta say that's not a poker term.
Not a poker term, huh?
It's beats. They say this beats that. This beats.
Right.
But I mean, you're from the South. I'll allow it. It's just.
You're from the South too.
No.
He's from a different kind of South.
Tennessee's the South.
Yeah,
it's not
but my
Texas.
parents.
It's more South than Texas is.
Well, but yeah, my parents ain't though, and so because of that, like card games and stuff, I play card games, and people in the South are like, "You play that wrong." You're like, "No, I play it like you play it in Illinois, not like you play it in." Like I got games that people don't even know the name of, and then I try to explain the game, and they're like, "Oh, that's called," and I'm like, "We don't use that term. We call it something different."
Okay, so the dictionary, which dictionary? I don't know which dictionary Google pulls from. Anyway, Trump. In bridge, wits, and similar card games, a playing card of the suit chosen to rank above the others, which can win a trick where a card of a different suit has been led. The suit having the rank above the others in a particular hand. A valuable resource that may be used, especially as a surprise, in order to gain an advantage. A helpful or admirable person. That's weird. In bridge, wits, and similar card games, play a trump on a card of another suit, having no cards of the suit led. To beat. Trump something up. To invent a false accusation or excuse.
When using it as a form of the word beat, I can understand what you mean, but I guess I grew up playing way too much back alley bridge that it just...
Origin of the word is English. It was originally triumph, and in the early 16th century was shortened to the term trump.
Okay. Anyway, sidetrack. Sorry. That's how my mind works.
All right. So you have faith, hope, and love. These three remain, and the greatest of these is love.
Yes.
So love is more important. Love overrides all of the details of faith, and love overrides and is more important than all the details of hope. What are you laughing about?
Just now watching you try to tiptoe around the word Trump. I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry. I will try to rein myself in and focus.
I'm never going to be able to use the word Trump again.
I know.
Thanks.
You're gonna be like, well, that cartridge. No, can't use that. Nooms is somewhere twitching.
Nooms is somewhere, and he's gonna find out that I used that term, and I'm gonna hear about it. And
I felt the disturbance in the force. He twitched. Oh, sorry.
All right. So one detail that jumped out at me when I was getting this already is verse 17 there in John chapter 5, where Jesus responds to them and he says, "My Father's still working, and I am working also."
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was interesting. To point blank say that God is still working, because there's this not so hard line in evangelical circles that talks about, well, God created for 6 days and then he rested because he was done creating. He was done working. He was done doing what he was going to do. And then they'll turn around and in the same breath, they'll say, well, God still works miracles. But there was always this not really unspoken idea that, well, God's not actually working. He only works miracles.
Sometimes.
This weird fine line.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
And there's also that thought process. There is a thought process, especially in the non. Uh-oh, you're still talking, but I can't hear you. I'm sorry. I see your mouth moving. No, you're good? Okay. There's also this thought process in non-charismatic, certain of the non-charismatic and the anti-charismatic churches that says that, God doesn't work that way anymore. The Holy Spirit doesn't work in those ways anymore.
Right.
That all ended when with the Old Testament, and that all ended with the, Holy Spirit coming, because now things just happen, but no one's actually causing. And you're like, okay, first off, when you really stop and think about that, that makes no sense when I even try to explain it nowadays. But back in the day, I was like, yeah, that makes perfect sense.
What? I'm sorry, I missed that part.
Yeah, so it reminds me of a quote from, well, not a quote, but a belief of Benjamin Franklin's. Benjamin Franklin is actually given credit for the quote, "God helps those who help themselves."
Mm-hmm.
Right? Except he didn't actually believe that quote. He used that quote as kind of like Southerners do the whole, well, bless your heart type thing. It was an insult. He would pull that out of his pocket when he was trying to insult somebody, that they were a lazy ne'er-do-well who couldn't help themselves, and they were just relying on God to help them. But Benjamin Franklin's well-spoken belief was that God created for 6 days, and then he not only stopped creating, but he stopped working altogether.
Yep.
That God literally did nothing from that point on. That there are interactions in the Bible with God, but that those interactions are like consequential interactions, like God was forced to interact, and that God only works when God is forced to work because something forces him to. And they called it this grandfather view of God, that God created everything and then he peaced out. He went on vacation, and he only got involved when he absolutely had to. Well, this scripture
blows that away. Oh, yeah.
Completely on its head. Goes, well, except Jesus point blank says, God's still working.
Yeah.
So, sorry, Benjamin Franklin. As an inventor, you did all right, but as a theologian, you shouldn't quit your day job.
He didn't, so we're good.
Yeah, he didn't. So.
No, but there's a lot of people. I mean, to be fair, everyone has beliefs, and they find their beliefs. And some people then never relook at their beliefs once they form them.
But they should. They should be constantly reading the scriptures, seeking confirmation for what they hear from the Lord, and constantly growing in their theological beliefs, and so.
recently I've been going back and listening to a lot of stuff from the past, just because I found, I got into Spotify kind of heavily recently, and I've never really used it, and I've only just, this is on the radio, these are things I downloaded, no big deal. And I recently really started getting into some of the older stuff on Spotify, and there's a song by DC Talk that talks about, the very opening of it, it mentions, the worst thing about Christianity is Christians who say one thing and then act completely different.
The quote from the guy who wrote the Lean on Me song.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so true. The fact that a lot of mainstream Christians, a lot of evangelicals, a lot of all forms of, let's be honest, a lot of religious people, not just Christianity, a lot of religious people overall, I have this faith, I've studied it, or I haven't studied it, I just have it because I was born into it, and I'm good. Because they've accepted it, they've said that that's what they are, and that's all they ever do. They never look into, like you were saying, why, how, what. It's just, yep, I believe that. And you're like, you believe what? That? Okay, that's not a thing.
And they're like, I don't know what I believe. I'm not a theologian. I'm not a pastor.
Yeah.
Why do I need to know those details?
Yeah.
Because you're claiming it's your faith. What do you mean? Why do you need to know?
And it definitely... It's funny, me even saying any of these things, because I was so like that for so long. But it's humorous how much of humanity is like that when to misquote something that's used all the time, sheeple. Are you going through an earthquake? What was that? What were you shaking your desk for?
I was pounding on the floor to get someone to come in here and turn off the baby monitor because I can hear the kids causing a ruckus in the other end of the house.
Oh. Okay.
You guys couldn't hear that through the microphone, all the ruckus the kids were...
No.
It's quite distracting.
That's okay. My kids are locked in their room.
Okay, I'm going to go turn off the baby monitor.
Okay. And by the way, I don't even have a lock on their door, so their door is not actually locked. That was a joke. Let's just be clear. In case anyone says anything, I'm not actually locking children anywhere.
Although if anybody was going to...
Well, it's fine. They'd get here and they'd be like, "There's a lock. Wait, this door doesn't even close correctly." You're like, "No."
It doesn't. The latch is broken. The regular latch on the frame.
It's like this door doesn't even latch closed. Like, not only does it not have a lock, it doesn't even latch. Like,
It doesn't even close.
I don't know. Sorry, I was.
All right. So, if you get a new job, when should you Sabbath?
Well, because we're talking about the spirit of the law, I mean, it depends. Yeah. It depends. You start a job on Tuesday, and your company doesn't work on Sundays, so you've set your Sunday as your Sabbath, or you've just set your Sunday as your Sabbath. You're not going to work 6 days. You're going to work a couple days. You're going to Sabbath, and then you're going to fall into your Sabbath. When it comes into people like retail and food services and things like that, your Sabbath might fluctuate week to week. Your Sabbath might never, ever be on a weekend. Your Sabbath as a pastor and people like that, you guys don't get to Sabbath on the weekends. Y'all working. especially if you deal with a big church. Like you get to like
Most
mega
pastors,
church
yeah.
status, like you're working Friday, Saturday, Sunday, like because there's services all 3 days, and then you're Sabbathing, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, some point during the week. Everyone has to set some time aside. But again, spirit, not letter. Because
Right.
you're on a Tuesday, and then all of a sudden something goes, your building catches on fire. You can't tell the fire department, sorry. Like, no, your building's on fire. Like, God's not going to strike you dead because your building's on fire. Like, you need to rest. Don't get me wrong.
If you go back and you read through the Book of Kings, it talks very specifically about a campaign between one king and another king, and the prophet of the Lord was speaking as a word from the Lord. And the word from the Lord was, you companies of men who go on duty on the Sabbath, you do this to prepare for the upcoming battle. And those of you who end your duty in the middle of the Sabbath, you do this to prepare for the upcoming battle. Yeah. People were still working on the Sabbath, right, in the Jewish cultures. And then they were taking a day of rest at another time.
Yeah. The only people that weren't were those people, the old men, that, were so legalist. I say old men because the conversation earlier, not just old men. But,
The convergent. I forgot the word.
Mudgeon?
Curmudgeon?
Curmudgeon? I don't know. The crotchety old people. The people that were so rigorous, it's the same people that were praying in the temple and praying with their arms outstretched and their heads bowed and their with a loud voice. And God's like, that's not those people. The people who
that's all.
Yeah. The people who put extra bells on their clothes just so you know they're wearing bells. And walking through an airport, they make everyone slower because they're still wearing bells on their clothes, even though they're nowhere close to a temple. Things like
People
this.
Put stuff on their face to make themselves look paler while they're fasting, so that everyone knows they're fasting.
Yeah. And they tell you all the time that they're fasting, as opposed to just, it's those people that are so rigorous, and it's to them, it is the religion, not the relationship. And that's the key to all of this, is the relationship. That's why there's a spirit of the law. Letter of the law is religion. Spirit of the law is the Holy Spirit. It is the relationship and how each of us have different walks of faith. It's, one of them things.
One of them things. So last week you and I talked about Pastor Robert Morris and how he's very strict about his Sabbath. He has a Sabbath, and when people email him on the Sabbath and say, I know it's your Sabbath, but, and he'll say, well, what other commandment do you want me to break? So I worked at Gateway Church. That's not a secret. And there were times when, in my department at least, in facilities, we have event after event after event after event after event, back to back to back to back to back, right? And so there'd be some weeks where you'd be working every day. Some of us would be working every day and not being allowed to take a Sabbath, and being told that it's okay to break the Sabbath if it's only for a limited amount of time. As long as it's for a short season, you're good. Which cuts completely crosswise with what the very leader of the church was saying, right? And so you get this issue where it's like, now wait a second, the leader of our organization is strictly adheres to a Sabbath and is telling us we need to strictly adhere to a Sabbath. And then further on down the line, now you're telling us that it's okay to skip our Sabbath for a certain amount of weeks, as long as it's only for a season of time that you're skipping it. And you kind of got to turn your head at that and be like, so at what point did the communication fail between the head of the organization that was saying, you know, this is what we're going to do, and then it gets translated through all this bureaucracy and down, you know? And so the idea of the Sabbath and the idea of these things that we do as part of our faith is it has to be ingrained in each person. Like you were saying, like, you got to know what you believe. And if you don't know what you believe, then you start to fall prey to this bureaucracy that, you know, can override and the religious pool of, oh, well, we have to serve a certain amount of people and we have to be able to have a certain amount of workers for these events. And that overrides the fundamental keystones of our belief if you don't know what you believe and you haven't internalized why you believe it, right?
And I mean, sadly, that happens so often in organizations, religious and otherwise, where up here it's great, and then as you filter through, you're like, my job sucks. My job's nothing like what our person talks about.
Right.
And I experienced that at a previous company where, you know, our leader was like, this is great. And you're like, this is great. And then my boss is like, you're an idiot. Oh, okay. And like, you know,
That's
we're
funny.
here to make money. Okay. That's not what everyone else says, but okay. You know,
That's what the leader of the company said.
yeah. Start with the leader, your boss's boss, your boss,
Your boss's boss.
his boss,
The guy whose lead you should be following.
You know,
that guy.
That's fine. There's reasons why we leave companies, and so because of that, it happens sadly, and it's because, like you said, each person has to buy into the vision and has to buy into in religious organizations, they have to buy into the teachings and faith itself, not just, you know, here's the rules.
Right.
You know, because when it's here's the rules, there's ways around rules. There's always ways around rules. You know, and
because rules deal with the letter of the law.
And so,
That's
you
the
know,
thing.
there are times when I worked at certain places and we can't sell these photos, for example. That doesn't mean they didn't get given. You know, is that the letter or the spirit? It's neither. You're breaking the law.
We never did that at our photo lab.
Well, I don't know. I didn't say anything about a photo lab. I said nothing about a company. I said nothing about any form of leadership I was in. I simply said things happen.
Well, I wasn't there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week when I managed my photo lab, so I can't say it didn't happen, but it didn't happen when I was on shift.
I mean, I was single back then. It depends on how cute the girl was, but that's beside the point. Rules get bent. It's one of them things.
It happens. It does. Yeah.
And so, you know, we all, when you don't believe in the focus or the actual reasons the rules exist, it's very easy to ignore them.
Right. And this rule of the Sabbath exists because
we all need rest.
We need rest. Right. And not only do we need rest, but it when I was talking about, you know, Hebrews 3 and Hebrews 4, which if you want to talk about some of the most confusing writing in the Bible you're ever going to read, Hebrews 3 and 4 are like just picture over picture over picture over picture, where you got to go back and read the stuff they're referencing 20 times before, at least for me, before it comes through what he's actually trying to say. You know, people talk about baptism as an outward sign of your inward faith. And that's the same point that we're going to say Paul, because I believe Paul wrote Hebrews. Right. A lot of people don't. There's a big debate, but we're going to say Paul. This is the same point that Paul is making in Hebrews chapter 3 and Hebrews chapter 4. is that not about baptism, though, but about the Sabbath. That if you're a Christian, if you're a spirit-filled, godly, loving, following Jesus Christian, then it is an outward sign of your inward faith that weekly you take a day of Sabbath rest.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not doing that, if that's not important to you, then Paul questions whether or not you're actually a Christian. And that's pretty hardcore, and that is right along with the way that Paul talked to people. You know, he didn't pull any punches.
No.
He wasn't as crass as Peter, but he didn't pull any punches.
Well, he didn't cut nobody's ear off, but he yelled at some people.
He didn't cut anybody's ear off, but he definitely yelled at some people. You're talking about a guy who he grew up training in the law and learning how to become the leader of the Jewish people as far as the leader of the temple. That's what he was training to do before he converted to Christianity. And so when you want to talk about condemnation and being hard on people and really driving a point home without any consideration for emotion, that's Paul.
Yeah.
He's pretty harsh.
Which is why Romans 8 is so important.
Right.
Yeah, when you look at for those of you who don't love Romans 8 as much as I do, Craig Rochelle actually spoke about it this weekend at Life Chat. Yeah, and he talked about, he used it as an example of when you're digging into Scripture. You look at 8, and then you look at 7, and I've read a lot. I've studied a lot just because of how I grew up. And, I know 8 really well. And I know 7. As soon as someone starts talking about 7, you're like, yeah, okay. I never laid them on top of each other. Either. Because, when you have 7's like, I'm terrible. I'm a horrible person. I'm a this. I'm a that. And then 8:1 is like, but there's no condemnation for those of us that are in Christ. And you're like, when you actually flow down and you go, oh, Paul was going through some stuff. And right here's where he realized and brought himself back to, and that's what Craig Rochelle was talking about, was bringing yourself back from, once you start that negative saying, you got to renew your mind. And here's an example of even someone like Paul going, I'm negative. Wait. Because he's just writing. And we all know how, when you're writing a letter, that's what happens. Everyone always thinks that, not everyone, but some people think oh, these are in-depth writings from founders of the faith. And no, man, they were writing letters to people. And so they
were just writing letters. Yeah.
They're writing. So it's okay, yeah. Wait. Well, there's no erasers. There was no whiteout back then. So he just had to keep it going. Okay, new page. Here we go. What I meant was, you got to remember that...
At best, he could have gone, no, that wasn't right, and crumpled up the page and started over from the last sentence. Now, where did I end that last page? Okay, let's try that again.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where... And so, when you look at that, it's so interesting to rethink about things like that. That it is. Sometimes it's confusing when you look at this and you're like, what is he even trying to say? He's writing a run-on sentence. That's what's going on. He's tired today.
So just one big run-on sentence.
Because these were people. And that's something we always have to remember when we're reading these things.
Yep.
Sorry, sidetrack again. My mind's all over the place.
No, that was a good track. That was a good side track. Yeah, so they're people. Peter, Paul, James, John, they're all people, and it really shows through their writing. When Paul's like, what are you making that face for?
I got confused. There's a little bit of an unsync every now and then on voice to picture because of how we're doing it. And so
that's what happens when you run your audio through one signal and your video through another.
Yeah. So your quotes, when you rose the quotes, you were saying people's names, and it was like, I'm not sure why he put names in quotes because those were actual people. Like,
quotes.
I'm confused. That's why I went, oh no, I know what's going on. Okay, delay.
Yeah.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah, so they're writing these letters to other people, and when so sometimes Paul will say stuff like, so and so came with me, but he got sick, and oh yeah, by the way, can you bring my coat with you the next time you come to see me? And you're reading this, and you're like, that's some real spiritual stuff right there, Paul. Keep that coming. I like that. That's some spiritual stuff.
And I mean, there's a lot of the Bible that's like that. Even in the Old Testament, there's some stuff where you're like, why is this important? And then you come across a sentence like Peleg, and you're like, oh, well, that's kind of important. But man, the part before and the part after, you're just like, I just wish I had a big chart on the wall that showed this, as opposed to, because man, this is rough. This is rough reading. And I am still looking into the chart on the wall thing. I haven't forgotten.
Yeah, so I've been listening through the Bible in a year. We started that program together, and you said you were still doing it, but according to the Bible app, you're behind me. Anyway, I've been listening to it, and it's interesting. You'll get through Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and through all that time, they retell certain parts of the story over and over and over, and I'm like, this was definitely not written for an American. This is not written for an American mindset. This is definitely written for a whole different culture, because if you tried to write the Bible today and sell it as a new work, nobody would fund that. Nobody would buy that. Nobody would want to read that. It is not written for an American mindset.
I am only 82 days behind.
82.
Oh, yeah, only.
James and Tina are only like 5 days.
Like a month behind?
James tries to not get 2 weeks behind. I'm around like 18. So I try and keep up with him.
I've been listening to while I drive. I'll listen to like two days worth, and then I'll switch over to podcasts while I'm driving.
You're on day 107.
Me?
And we're on day 138. So yeah, you're about a month behind.
So,
yeah, I need to get back in. It's been one of those things where I set it aside, and even I was like, yesterday I was like, okay, this has got to get a priority again, because I don't want to just blow through it like I could, because I can read fast. That's not the point of this. But yeah, I need to, and I need everyone to keep bringing it up.
Okay.
I've never actually read through Kings, First and Second Kings, because I was like, it's Kings, that's boring. And so listening through it has been really, really, really frustrating, because they'll start talking about a specific king, and they'll be like, and he's doing this, and he's doing this, and I'm getting into it, and I'm like, yeah, he's doing this, and then it'll go, and the rest of his works are well detailed in the Jewish history of kings. And I'm like, what? What about the rest of the story? I want to hear the rest of the story. What happens to him? Oh, it's been frustrating.
Yeah, there's a lot, and it is a frustrating aspect. There's a lot in Kings and Chronicles and Judges, actually, that are like that, where you're just like, Now, Judges is just one big giant facepalm. Over and over and over again. It's just an example of how screwed up people are without godly leadership, over and over and over and over. But there's a couple of gems in there. There's a couple of gems, like people that are just cool. Like gems like dumpster fires, like the reason people watch Tiger King. Yeah, there's some of those. Tent Spike Lady. With all the extra, man, with all those details, that's a crazy story right there. I love Tent Spike Lady, and I can't ever remember her name until I get to it, and then as soon as I start reading it, I'm like, oh wait, this is a good one. I know what's about to happen. And she poured him milk, and she whoa. And then spike to the head. Ha! And then drove a spike through his head. Hey, that's what you get. I'm sorry. They some vengeful, like, you put a judge, it ain't you in the wrong place. Like, if you're mentioned in judges, you made a mistake. Like, that's pretty much what, either on one side or the other, you made a mistake. Sometimes both, i.e. Samson. He was just messed up.
Samson was just, that's a messed up story from start to finish. Like, that's messed up.
He was an interesting soul. We'll leave it at that.
Man, that's messed up. Like,
yeah.
Yeah. All right. So the podcast that came out about half an hour ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I had, I have my list of podcast topics that are podcasts coming up. And I sat on this podcast topic all week last week with just the 2 key verses for it and an opening paragraph and nothing else. And every time I pull it out to work on it, I just couldn't. I couldn't work on it. I couldn't get anything to go, So yesterday I went, okay, fine. We'll move to the next topic. And so yesterday morning, then I started working on the next topic, and everything's going great. And I get to about 800 words. Yeah, 800 words. And then the key scripture for the topic I originally had decided to write popped into the podcast. And then wait, what? And then the next key scripture came into the pod. And I was like, oh, it wasn't that I was on the wrong topic. It was that I was being myopic. And so it's interesting that
you were trying to force the hand.
I was trying to force the hand, exactly. And so, and being narrow-sighted in trying to make it happen instead of, the right process. And it's difficult. If you had told me in high school that one day I'd be writing 1,300-word weekly essays, I probably would have paid more attention. But nobody told me that, and so, yeah.
I feel you on that, as I'm currently writing a 30-page document for work,
Right. But they told me I'd be using things like Pythagorean theorem, and I don't use that. They didn't tell me I'd be actually using English and grammar. They told me I'd be using, like, hard math. And it's just the opposite. I don't use any hard math, and I'm using all kinds of grammar in English. So, yeah. So the podcast that just came out, it's called The Needle's Eye, and we're talking about what we have in common with camels. So
I do tend to carry water. I retain water. That's why.
Some water. Yeah.
That's why I'm 260 right now. It's all retained water. That's my belief.
So on the good news side, when we started keto together 3 years ago, I was at 350 pounds.
Right.
And right now, I've only gotten back up to 325, even though I haven't been on keto for like a year and a half.
Yep.
So I kept off that top 25 pounds, so that's good news.
I found it.
You found the 25 pounds that I've kept off?
Yeah. Because my biggest weight previous to a year ago was 350. And I'm needing to get on something, but this being in the house is not working for trying to diet in any way, shape, form, or idea. I need to go back to an office.
So you're in the house fat, and you're fat in the house.
Yes. Yes.
Y'all are nuts.
We TikTok too much. I TikTok the most.
Yes,
I TikTok just the right amount.
I TikTok way too much.
I had a youth pastor when I was right after I got saved. I had a youth pastor who would say, "A man of God never gets lost, and he always arrives on time, whether he's late or not."
No, that youth pastor was wrong. Sorry.
He's always on time, whether he's late or not.
No. No.
All right, so go listen to the podcast, and here in about half an hour, the video version will drop. It'll drop wherever you're, watching this right now. Have a great week. Yeah, and now we're gonna buffer for 30 seconds because the thing cuts off 30 seconds at the end. So,
sometimes. Bye. Have a good one.
Bye. Have a good week. So during this 30-second buffer, you guys see my cool new boom arm that we got?
I did.
Nice?
I like it. I want a boom arm. I need a boom arm to go with my. My sister loves me. You know what's in this bag?
Corn nuggets.
Yes, they are.
Baby, can I just cut the lion out, or do you like the whole thing?
I can't believe I was about to eat on a live stream.
You're about to eat on the live stream?
Okay, that's 30 seconds. I'm about to eat these corn nuggets. Bye.
Bye.